Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Last Edit podcast, a weekly podcast on film, starring yours truly, Silver Hawkins, and my great friend.
Citizen Sleeve, hello there.
Of course, The Last Edit is a podcast in which we have a weekly discussion on films of our choosing, and we each alternate a pick every week. And this week it's been my choice, my turn, and I chose a Japanese animated film called The Tale of the Princess Kaguya by Isao Takahata, one of the co-founders of Studio Ghibli, a renowned Japanese animation studio. And honestly, I think one of the most beautiful animated films I've ever seen. It was a film that profoundly affected me the first time I saw it. It's like a living, moving watercolor painting. And really sort of tore me apart at the ending. And like every time I've seen it since then, I've sort of been even more torn apart because I know what's coming at the end. And it sort of makes the film even more emotionally resonant with me. It's a film that deals with a lot of really heavy themes like duty, love, family, and death and mortality. And it does it in a really, really compelling and earnest way. At least that's how it feels. It's based on an old Japanese legend about the bamboo cutter, I think it's called. And basically it starts out with a bamboo cutter who is out cutting bamboo, and then in the process of cutting bamboo finds a little girl in the blossom of one of the bamboo stalks. Takes her home. She grows into a baby, and from there the bamboo cutter and his wife raises the baby. The bamboo cutter then starts finding gold and clothes and so forth in the bamboo he cuts, and he takes this as a sign that this girl is royalty and that she needs to be properly treated, and he takes her to the city where she then becomes a princess, and basically sort of locks her into an existence in that world. And that's where the movie basically moves on from. So I'm curious, you hadn't seen it, right?
No, I've seen a few Studio Ghibli films, well, quite a lot of Studio Ghibli films before. Castle in the Sky is probably my prevailing childhood memory.
Takahata's previous, most famous film was Grave of the Fireflies. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Another, again, I don't think I've seen.
That film is about as soul-crushingly depressing as it gets. It's about two Japanese kids during World War II who are orphaned and then have to move around, and the movie basically depicts them starving to death. At one point, they get so desperate that the youngest brother basically starts eating, or sister starts eating dirt.
That rings a bell. Again, it might be one of the ones I've kind of seen, but I saw such a long time ago. There was a little period in the UK on Channel 4 where loads of anime and manga were being shown, and for that kind of little 5-year, 7-year period, we got everything. My brother and I just binged it pretty much, but that was such a long time ago. But yeah, I've seen other bits since. I think the most striking thing about this one straight away is the art style. It's very traditional. It's got a great sense of motion. The watercolor is beautiful to look at, and there are some scenes which are just quite astounding. The way the artist managed to produce this level of art. I really like little moments like when she runs away from the house for a bit in a dream, I think it is, and the motion of her running with the different colours and the cloaks falling off her.
At that moment, it shifts away from watercolor to being charcoal. It's basically just charcoal drawings.
Yeah, it becomes a lot more blurry and a sense of speed and dynamism in the way she wants to escape from where she is.
Yeah.
The music, music.
Yeah,
is
Joe
great.
Hisaishi, again from Studio Ghibli stable, has scored I think every Miyazaki film, and I think, I mean, to me this is his most beautiful score, which is a really, really, really high bar for Hisaishi.
Well, it's very delicate. It's very balanced. It's very beautifully melancholy at times, and then you do have those moments when it's a little bit more unsettling, perhaps. But for the most part, it's this really hauntingly beautiful track that permeates various parts of the film and various scenes.
Its main focus is piano, flute, and like the koto, like sitar, guitar.
Sitar guitar, yeah. It's really really beautiful. And then the characters. I mean, there's just the opening alone when the cutter is out in the bamboo forest and he cuts down and first sees the little princess and doesn't quite know what to make of her yet. And the way we then she's accepted, the woodcutters kind of take her as their own child, and then her development's really interesting because she has these growth spurts that jump her forward a year or two.
Yeah.
The magic of the moon, as we later discover. But it feels like a poem. It feels, because it's based on folklore, this whole film has a lovely cyclical notion and a lovely fairy tale-esque feeling to it. It's got a nice balanced pace. It never rushes because it thinks it needs to cut its running time down because it's an animated movie. Most animated movies, you're lucky if you hit 90 minutes. So this one really takes its time to establish each of the characters, their wants, their needs, their whys. And especially for me, the father who, through her, is trying to do what many celebrity parents, I guess, or parents of that ilk, try and do, which is push their own wishes and dreams upon them to some extent. But he really wants the best for her.
Yeah.
But through that, he also wants the best for himself, which is,
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that he conflates his ideas of what would be like happiness and success with what would be hers. He conflicts the two, like, because he equates it with status, with success, with wealth. But obviously none of those things have any importance to the girl at all. To Kaguya.
And she's grown up in the forest with the song goes, it's beasts, and it goes through all the different insects and the forest itself. She loves that. She loves nature and the beauty of nature and being outdoors and being at one with them, rather than this material obsession that is starting to develop around her. And as we develop in the story, she becomes the wanted princess that all the suitors are after, and that's not something she ever wanted, but it's a life she's kind of been placed in.
Yeah.
And her as a character, she has these moments when she's incredibly flamboyant and exuberant and youthful and plays outdoors, and it plays when she first gets to the mansion they bought in the city, and plays when she first gets her new gowns and her new dresses and stuff like that, because it's all new. But the moment that she's starting to realise she's being forced into a particular role where they shave her eyebrows off, they paint on traditionally as it would have been in the culture, and she starts realising that the culture itself is oppressing her, and she goes through these moments when she's very quiet, she barely speaks, she acknowledges other people and what they're saying, but she doesn't really have anything to say about them. But then that fiery nature will come back now and again, and especially when the suitors come to town, that's when we see that kind of kick back.
I think the most telling scene for her character is the scene where her father brings in a bird in a cage as a present for her. And the first thing she does when he leaves is she picks up the bird cage and lets the bird out.
Yeah.
And lets it fly away. She frees it. Like, the symbolism there is pretty obvious, but it's pretty effective.
Yeah, perfect metaphor. Yeah, absolutely. And the film does that throughout. I mean, there are some gorgeous moments. There really are some absolutely gorgeous moments.
You mentioned the animation. I think this is probably the best I've ever seen motion animated. Like, there are like 3 or 4 standout moments in this film in terms of motion. The first is when she learns to walk as a child, when she's just sort of numbling around, crawling and so forth.
Following the frog.
And then she sees a frog and she starts to emulate the frog. She falls over the edge, and then she stands on her own legs and she starts to walk. And the way that's animated is just unbelievable. It's so lifelike, the way she moves. There isn't really another word for this film, I think, that applies than magical in its animation and in the way it breathes life into its characters. Because, the characters don't look human. They have exaggerated features. They're a bit like triplets in Belleville. Some of them are caricatures. But they have immense life and character and identity to them in like tiny little moments that kind of define them. Like the father, when they arrive at the estate, he gets this tall hat, and he keeps bumping the hat on the top of doorways over and over and over, and every time he arrives, and in this humorous little sort of recurring joke. And for Kaguya, like every time she sits down and like plays the koto, or like the sitar guitar musical instrument, her hair a couple of locks of her hair start falling in front of her face, and she has to sort of brush them back. And it's just little moments like that help ground the characters and make them believable and immerses them and you into that world. That's really, really effective. And I mean, just the character design as well, like her little servant girl who follows her around everywhere. And and all of the suitors, who come to sort of court her, and the way she deals with them, where she gives them each these impossible tasks to accomplish. And one of them.
What's the name of the child, the male kid, the leader of that little group that is throughout the film at various parts?
I think it's Sotomaru.
Sutomaru, that's it. I found his character really interesting and kind of heartbreaking, but also it works out in the end.
I mean, fundamentally, I think at the most fundamental level, this movie is about regret.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about the things you could have done in your life, but you didn't do, out of a sense of obligation or whatever, and all of the what ifs that we keep asking ourselves. Because obviously, the life that Kaguya would have liked to have lived was to stay in the forest with her family and with Sotomaru and the little gang of kids that they had there, and her little gang of friends, and to just sort of live out their lives in that sort of idyllic existence. But instead, she gets moved to the city, and she stays there. She never voices her discontent to her father because she wants to please him. She loves him. That's also sort of the tragedy of the thing, because like you said, he wants her to be like we talked about. He wants her to be happy, but he conflates her happiness with his own, and she in turn wants him to be happy. So she doesn't voice her own how unhappy she actually is under the conditions that she's under. So he has no idea. He assumes that she's happy, even though she's enormously unhappy, and that's extremely common, unfortunately, in human relationships, that deeply underlying misunderstanding where we think we understand each other, but we don't really, because we never really say, I mean, I think you know how I feel, even though I never say it, and we never express it. We just assume that the other person feels it, but maybe they don't. Maybe they don't catch on to the body language or the gestures or whatever that we're expressing towards them. These misunderstandings are part of every human relationship at some level, and it's enormously sad when they get in the way of people's happiness in the way that they do for Kaguya.
Yeah, I mean, the father, I think the moment when he really gets a proper shock is when she says, "If you set me up with this person and try and marry me off," I think it's the Emperor, His Majesty, yeah. And we'll talk about the suitors in a minute. She says, if I can't remember which way round she says it, but something like, "If you make me marry him, as soon as I see you wearing that court hat, I will kill myself." I was like, he suddenly then is like, whoa, maybe I am putting my own happiness above hers a little bit at least. But the suitors are really funny.
Yeah.
Different ways in which they come across physically. So you've got a warrior, you've got a soft-spoken guy, you've got a slightly more rotund individual. You've got these different kind of elongated and wider body types, and the voices are really interesting as well. And they each are invited to the mansion to come and woo the princess. And she very cleverly, they all tell her how wonderful she is and attach her to some kind of real world object.
You're as beautiful as a morning rainbow or whatever.
The jewel branch of Hanoi and a dragon's throat and all this stuff. This unobtainably beautiful treasure. So she says, "Okay, fine. If you want my hand in marriage, then each of you go off and find the thing that you've just compared me to." And they've all obviously chosen, like, it's like saying the head of Medusa or something.
Yeah.
It's this fantastical thing that can never be obtained. And so one by one they come back and they attempt to show the princess that treasure, that magical treasure they found, and obviously it's all fake. The first one to come back is the branch of Hanoi, and it's just a tree with jewels hanging from it that's been made by somebody else that they find out a little bit later. And then the more rotund suitor brings the Fair of Fire, or something like that, the Rat Fair of Fire, and she convinces him to try and burn
the
it.
skin of it, yeah.
Yeah, to burn it because it wouldn't burn if it was real. And you've got the warrior trying to fight the dragon and getting screwed over on that boat. Each of them comes back with this weird concocted version. And then even there's that prince who comes with the flower.
Yeah, he's the one who comes the
obsessive
closest.
for a bit.
I mean, he's the one who comes the closest when he gives that whole speech about how he wants to take her away and basically offers her the life that she longs for. The life in nature, surrounded by flowers and all the things from her past that she yearns for, and that she's sort of tried to recreate in her garden, where she's basically created this miniature version of the world she grew up in. And he's there offering her all of that. But of course, he isn't really interested in her. He's interested in the idealized idea of her, which is then evidenced by the fact that Kaguya's mother then tests the guy by putting a less than a traditionally attractive person in the role of Kaguya when he goes behind the curtain to see what she looks like, he's not impressed with.
No, he is not, and doesn't he faint as well or something?
Yeah,
or gets knocked out. Yeah.
So
all these suitors come, nothing doing, no way. And in the end, His Majesty hears about it, the Emperor, and decides that he will be her suitor. And of course, he has more power than any of those nobles who've come before. And he sees this as a challenge, someone he wants to meet. So he invites her to be a lady of court, along with the father, who would be a member of court. And he's really excited because this is, as we said, with the interweaving of the two stories and how what he wants is as important as what she wants, and he can't untangle those things. And he comes in really excited, exceptionally happy into the room with the mother and the princess. And the princess just says, no, reject the offer, refuse the offer. I'm not worthy, I don't want to do it, it's not the life I want. And he still can't understand, but it's betterment, it's being better. A lady of the court, you be a lady of the court. And
it's what every woman would want. I mean, this is the highest social position for a woman possible in the realm. So yeah.
And then the Emperor decides, hey, that's even more of a challenge. Heads over to the mansion and almost physically tries to move her at one point.
Yeah, he tries to carry her to her to his litter, basically.
Yeah,
so
just like kidnap her almost. Yeah. But he's got the power to do that because he's the Emperor. But that whole section is where, she's seen more and more and more as an object throughout the film by other people.
Yeah, because I mean, especially on her name day, where there's a large celebration for her name day, and basically she can't partake in it at all. She just has to sit in this little, almost like a prison cell. It's basically just this little enclosed space with drapes all around it, where she's all alone with her servant girl. And she just hears all these men like talking about her, laughing, like making fun of the idea. No, she's not really a princess, and her father's just this common redneck. And then she runs away. She runs back home in a sequence that is staggering in its animation, like you touched on. It's drawn in charcoal with just a tremendous, gives the scene a tremendous sense of dynamism and desperation. Like, especially also with the accompanying soundtrack, because just not only the music is an important sound component of the film, but the sound as well, like the sound of footsteps. It has an extremely tactile feel to it. The soundtrack, like also the wind blowing through leaves and grass and so forth. Just the sound in general in this movie is on a scale that a lot of other films don't really attain.
Well, yeah, to attain a soundscape that for an animated film in particular is really difficult, especially when it's not drawn in CG. You know, when it's hand drawn,
Yeah.
it's always more difficult to emote, or can be, especially through your soundscape. But yeah, the performances audibly are really, really cool, really weighty at times.
And she runs back home, and she finds that her home is not the way she remembers it.
Yeah.
Like everyone is gone, because Satomaru and the community he lived in, they were woodcutters, and so they have to move out of the area for 10 years because they've harvested so much wood that if they harvest more, the forest is going to die. So they have to give the forest time to sort of regrow. So they've moved to another forest to harvest there. And so and back home, other people, a different family has now moved in to the house where she used to live with the bamboo cutter. So everything is different. Nothing is the way she remembers it, which is something that's going to be really familiar to people, because that's how life is. The past isn't really what we remember it. Like the what ifs aren't often the way we like to imagine them to be.
Well, it's always the idealized version of what you remember, isn't it? It's never the actual thing, or it's a person or a place or a time, or a song that can trigger that memory. And yeah, the nostalgia of the place she used to live is now moved on, because everybody does move on. And unfortunately for her, she's been trapped in this environment where her life hasn't really been able to move on in the way she would have wanted it.
And the moment she realizes that is the moment she really kind of stops resisting any sense of... Because initially she does resist, like she refuses to shave her eyebrows and paint her teeth and all those like traditional things for a princess. But after that, she buckles down, studies her calligraphy, her music lessons, her lessons in manners and so forth, masters all of them, and becomes this really obedient traditional princess. After she realizes that past is impossible to sort of go back to. And yeah, afterwards, after the emperor tries to grab her, there's another scene. I don't remember precisely when it is, when they head back they head out for the cherry tree.
Oh yeah.
I think it's around the time of the suitors, and it run in between the time of the suitors and the emperor, from what I remember. And so she goes out because finally the suitors have cleared off, because she hasn't been able to leave the palace at all, because the street outside has just been packed with different suitors who all want to see her or woo her or whatever. And after she makes these outrageous demands, it's right after she makes the demands of the suitors, and they go off.
Of the suitors, yeah.
Because when she's made those demands, like everyone, no, we can't do that, and so everyone disperses. And she's finally able to head out, and so she heads to this cherry tree. And again, the way she runs up to the cherry tree, the way that's animated, is just stunning. And her dance underneath the cherry tree with the falling leaves. And then she loses herself again in that dream. And then she's torn out of it when she bumps into this little child from a commoner family. And then you see the child's mother gets immediately panic-stricken because she's a noblewoman. And they immediately fall to their knees and apologize and so forth, and that of course completely bursts Kaguya's bubble that you can't escape. I can't escape this life. I'm forever trapped in it. No matter where I go, it's going to follow me. I can't get away from this person that I am now. And with that resignation, she decides to just immediately head back to the palace. And that's
And
another.
just at the end of that scene, you have the little boy and the little girl who are playing in the ravine as the mother walks off,
Yeah.
and she kind of looks wantingly on because that's what she used to do as a
Yes.
child.
And that's
So
what she
it's that
wants.
bittersweet kind of the break of her memory into what was
Yeah,
in
and
reality is
what
now.
she wants, what she still wants, she still yearns for that past,
Yeah.
and that nostalgia. And then she heads back, and it's the way it's delivered is so effective and so heartbreaking. And then she goes back home, and there's the whole thing with these suitors coming back one by one, and trying to fit some of them trying to fake or cheat, and paying for it, and the last of them paying it for it with his life when he falls down trying to fetch swallow's eggs.
Yeah.
And of course, that also is not what she wanted. She didn't want to kill anyone, and that shocks her significantly as well. And then the emperor tries to sort of force himself on her, and she disappears, just disappears in his arms. And he goes looking for her and promises that if she shows herself, he'll leave. And so she shows herself. And then she realizes that because in that moment when she disappeared, she called out to anyone save me, get me out of here. Get me away from this man who's grabbing me, which was the emperor. And the person coming to get her and save her are the people who sent her back to Earth, which is the moon, or the moon people, which is where she's really from. And they're now coming to get her after about 15 days, I think it is, or something.
It's the 15th of the month, I think. That's when they're the
Yeah, the 15th night or something.
Yeah, it's a weird scene because the emperor's obviously trying to force himself upon her, and she has this phase movement, and the animation's really interesting because it phases from that red at the top of the screen into the blue at the back, and she phases into that, and I like that colour distinction in that scene to really show where both of them are. But yeah, we then lead into approaching the ending, and it's really sad because she talks to her mum and her dad about not wanting to leave and the things she loves here, but she also understands that she's just a thing and an object now that people desire, and if they can't have her, they might get hurt. And it's the whole film at that point becomes very bittersweet, and it becomes very fairy tale like. You know, from you go back to whence you came, and we have this. The whole ending is really, really nice. The music, the way the moon people come down on the clouds, almost like not quite like the Valkyrie Hawkmen in Flash Gordon, but you know what I mean. Just like on these movable clouds, and they come down.
Yeah.
And it's all very, very Studio Ghibli.
And the archers try and attack. They try and protect Kaguya, but of course, the moment the arrows get near the congregation of moon people, they turn into flowers.
Turn into flowers, yeah.
And then as the congregation passes, everyone falls asleep.
Yeah. All those with the wrong kind of thoughts. So the parents stay awake and they try and claw their way over to the clouds.
Well, I mean, the father gets knocked out as they pass when he tries to sort of run for Kaguya.
And he falls
gets knocked
into that
out.
cloud, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and then he gets put down or set down on the ground. And then they go and pick up Kaguya. And but the father and everyone gets kind of woken up when the servant girl goes to rally some children, and they start singing that song that's been the motif of the film throughout, about sort of going back to where you came from, about that very cycle. Yeah, and just that goodbye. I mean, the goodbye scenes between Kaguya and her parents are what really get to me. Like the father's insistence, no. I mean, I can't be impotent here. I have to do something. There is some way I can save you, and I'm going to find it. But of course, there is no way he can save her. He is impotent, and that is the impotence in the face of death. And our inability to sort of challenge it. It's really resonant. It's really powerful. It's really, and you keep the moment they put, because she says there's the moment the moon people have this cloak, and the moment they put the cloak on her is the moment she'll forget everything about she's ever lived or experienced on Earth.
Mm.
And the moment they put it on her, and she sits back up with presumably her parents, the king and queen of the moon people, and they start going back, and the camera keeps zooming in on her. You keep expecting that there's gonna be a glint of recognition or something in a look backwards, and it doesn't come until the very, very end when she's basically at the moon, looking back on Earth. I mean, she doesn't look back to her parents. She doesn't acknowledge her parents in any way after.
It's just Earth, this other place. That's it now.
Yeah, precisely like the person she described that she first heard the song from, who was another moon person who had been to Earth and had the same sort of regret. Because of course, Kaguya's regret comes when she realizes her own mortality and the way she should have lived, opposed to the way that she did live. Where she goes back to the village, and there's a scene with Sotomaru where they kind of touch on, could we have been happy together, which then turns out to be a dream for Sotomaru.
Dream sequence, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's. I mean, again, it deals in these what ifs and scenarios that we keep asking ourselves in our lives. What if I had done this? Would this be different to my life? I wish my life had turned out this way and not this way. That are really, really powerful. It's a film that guts me emotionally every time I watch it. Like really sobbing.
I don't think it quite hits me as emotionally as you do. I think I really, really like it. I like the poetic nature of its narrative and the cyclical nature of its narrative. As we said, it's very fairy tale like, based on folklore, and it feels like that. I love the animation. There are moments when it's staggeringly beautiful, especially as you said, those moments of motion, and the way the music brings everything together cohesively. You know, like I said, I haven't seen all of Studio Ghibli's films, but it's certainly up there with their best. One of the great things about Studio Ghibli films is that we shouldn't, in my opinion, really be talking about them in the best animated films ever made. They're the best films ever made, a lot of them. It's not just about this, you know, the way the 2D animation works or the fact that it's shoved into a different genre. These are films which are so well made. They're up there with the very, very best, and this is just such.
And again, they're
film.
films that wouldn't work if they weren't animated. They wouldn't work as live action films. Like Kaguya wouldn't work as a live action film.
Well, no, you wouldn't get the subtlety that you'd get from. I mean, okay, live performance versus animation is very, very difficult to discuss in terms of the way you emote, especially when it's 2D animation as opposed to something like 3D. But there's a nuance in that particular hand-drawn type of art style that you see in studios like Studio Ghibli that is very unique, and it is very effective at creating a subtlety and a nuance that you maybe don't find in other forms of more traditional, more modern animation that we see in Hollywood or in other major companies now. It just feels a bit more handcrafted and real, a bit more heart in it.
Yeah. I would agree.
Well, I think you should get out there and give this a go. Studio Ghibli fans out there, I'm sure, will be very familiar with this film.
Unfortunately, as far as I know, this isn't really streamable anywhere, but you'll have to get it on Blu-ray or DVD. I don't know if it's out on Blu-ray, actually. I think it might only be out on DVD. I know I could only get it on DVD.
It's not one of the ones I've seen in the Ghibli collections that you can get. I don't ever recall seeing it in one of those box sets. So yeah, it might be one of the lesser known and more difficult to get hold of.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I mean, it actually lost out the Academy Award, which I think was one of the biggest sort of upsets to me of Academy Award history. It lost out to Big Hero 6 that year.
Oh, which I do love. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong,
I
do
mean
love
it's a
that
good-
film.
it's a solid animated film.
I even
but,
do fa la 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 with my girlfriend every bloody day.
But I mean, compared to this, I think there's just a gap there in terms of
well, in terms of an
artistry.
Academy film,
Yeah.
I mean, it's got everything an Academy would normally want. It's a
I
drama.
mean, I think it's here in this case, it's just an extent of how many people actually saw the different films. I think.
yeah, absolutely. The broad audience definitely would have helped Big Hero 6, whereas this, I assume, was a much more limited
Yeah,
release.
I think most Academy Award owners had just seen Big Hero 6 and not Kaguya.
That's a shame.
Even though presumably, as far as I know, they get screeners for the films.
Yeah, they get screeners with separate films or multiple films on now.
Yeah.
Although the last one, I think, was actually, they were streamed, and you enter a key. So I think
Oh,
even that's
right.
changing now. Yeah, so they're having to change that as well now. So
That would be
modern
understandable.
yeah. So yeah, I really liked it. I hadn't seen it before. I thought it was a beautiful piece of art and a really heartbreaking and bittersweet story in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be bittersweet. Like, it's a movie about regret. So, few
Yeah.
things are more bittersweet than regret.
Yeah, so if you can get hold of it, get out there and give it a watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so next week is my choice. Now, this was a really difficult one this week, because I had one in mind that we're not going to do. And then as soon as I knew it was Studio Ghibli, I was like, oh, do I do another Ghibli film? No, okay. So I'm going to choose one of my favourite animated films of all time. It's a bit overlooked now, I guess, and it's maybe got swallowed by the annals of time, but I love it. And that's Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim from 1982. I just love that film. I love its art
it's a great
style.
film.
I love everything about trying to escape the rats and the war that's going on. The villains are amazing.
It's my favorite Don Bluth film, certainly.
Excellent, good stuff. Yeah, so I just thought follow animation with animation this one time, and then we'll have a bit of a change up next time. So,
Yeah.
Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim, one of my all-time childhood favourite films.
Same for me. So,
Right, thank you so much for watching the Last Edit podcast.
and please join us for the next one.
Obscurer the better, don't forget. We'll have to choose something so obscure, only about 18 people in the world have seen it at some point, and we happen to be two of them. So thank you. Yeah, this has been the Last Edit podcast. We're here every week. Talk to us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the different films that we cover. And, yeah, take it easy.
Take care.